Friends, hello. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up. I am Carter Wilson. I've been doing this podcast for over 5 years now, and I get excited every time I sit down with a new guest because talking to writers without any script, without any prepared questions, just seeing where the conversation takes us is so motivating to me, so inspiring to me. A lot of times it helps me even guide my own work when I'm talking to somebody and they talk about their process. It makes me want to try something new. So at the end of every conversation, I always have this like nice adrenaline rush. Real quickly, I just want to say if you are looking for one-on-one writing coaching, I do have a company called unboundwriter.com where I work with writers and we work on manuscripts together, or I just give them feedback, or sometimes we even work together just with encouragement and accountability. If you are interested in that kind of thing, you can just go visit the site at unboundwriter.com, and you can even sign up for a free consultation call where we can just talk about what your needs are. At Unbound Writer, I also offer self-guided online courses as well as seminars and writing retreats. And that brings me to my guest today. So today I talked to Clémence Michallon. So Clémence is a fantastic thriller writer, and she's actually somebody that Alex Finlay and I are looking to work with as a co-teacher at a writing retreat to be put on in Paris later this year. So we're looking for October 2026. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, we'll have more clarity around that. If not, we might push it to the spring of 2027. But Clémence is a wonderful person and would make a great instructor. So I'm excited to have her as part of the Unbound Writer retreat team for this particular retreat. But obviously she's a great writer. So she's a journalist by training, but always wanted to be a novelist. And, as she describes in the episode, she had some struggles with writing, as we all do. She published a novel in French, which did get published, probably didn't sell a whole lot of copies as she kind of described it. Has another book that's sitting in a drawer, and we all have those. But then her US debut was The Quiet Tenant that came out in June of 2023 and just took off. It was one of those debuts that just kind of lit the world on fire, and it was amazing. And she got a lot of well-deserved accolades for it, sold a lot of copies, and she has just followed it up last year with the book Our Last Resort, and she's currently working on her third novel. This was a fantastic conversation. So I got to know Clémence first in the Hamptons Who Done It last year. Then I saw her at the Ohio Book Festival as well. And I've gotten to know her better because I reached out to her about potentially seeing if she was interested in joining us for a retreat in Paris. So we've gotten to talk more and more, but this is my first time where I really got to sit down and pick her brain about writing. And we did talk about her journey a decent amount, but really spent a lot of time not only on craft, but on the psychology of writing. How do you get over certain hurdles? How do you get over the lack of control? Or when do you get stuck and what do you do about it? So we actually went longer than most interviews just because I think we both got wrapped up into what the other person was saying. So it was a fantastic conversation. I could have talked to her for much longer, but I did have to stop it at about, it went on almost an hour. So this is a great one, especially if you're craft focused, especially if you are a thriller, mystery, suspense writer. I think you're going to enjoy this one. This is my conversation with Clémence Michallon. So good to see you again. And just, for the listeners. So I guess we first met at Hamptons Who Done It. Is that
Yes, we met
correct?
under our assumed names during a murder mystery dinner.
That's
Um,
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we
yeah,
both had roles in that. I guess
that's
everybody
right.
kind of did. It was a weird murder mystery because they were trying to include, dozens of people. And so there were a lot of like people who had roles that just meant nothing and went nowhere.
I believe mine was just a decoy, but boy, did I have fun doing it. I think I was this cheerleader who had like a bone to pick with everybody. And I got really into it. It was a very natural part for me to play. The game was brilliantly hosted by our friend Abby Endler, Crime by the
Yeah.
Book on Instagram. She did a
Yeah.
wonderful job. Yeah, it was really fun that night.
Yeah, it's funny. Abby is now working with my publisher. So she is now my PR person
Oh, you're so
for my
lucky.
next book. So yeah, I was just emailing her today. So I'm super excited.
You
Um,
are in good hands.
I know
Great
she's
hands.
great. I mean, Poison Pen Press is great anyway, but so they needed they're a massively growing imprint of source books, and they definitely needed more marketing and PR support because Mandy, who's there, is just overwhelmed. She does a great job too. But so now they finally just hired a few people. So I'm excited. I mean, they have Frida McFadden as an author, so it's like
They
that's
have
a
a
hundred
lot to
percent of
do.
Mandy's time, pretty much.
Yes. Yes, they have a lot to do. They've had a really good year, haven't they? Source
Yeah,
books?
they've
Yeah,
source, but yeah, they hit their source books is now a big five publisher.
that's
Um,
right.
so that was exciting. But yeah, going back to murder mystery, it's funny. I'm actually writing a murder mystery dinner for this charity auction, and so we're going to be doing that in May, and it's like 16 people, and so now I'm finding myself in the throes of how to write like a 45-minute play that's performed at different points of time over the course of a four-course meal.
Yeah, and without rehearsal either, so you have to like guide people quite a bit, right? Like it's
Yeah, so
you
I think
know.
what's going to happen is I am going to give, so it's for this studio, it's for these underprivileged young people essentially who are focusing on the arts, but a lot of them are dancers. So we're trying to find actors among them. Um, and I have about six roles that I'm writing. So about a month and a half ahead of time, I'm going to give them a script and their whole character bios. But the idea is like memorize as many lines as you can, but just here's the goal that we're getting to. So if you have to improv, interact with the diners, whatever, so it'll be fun. So I'll get to go down and be a part of it and stuff like that.
That's
So
really fun. Well, and
it's
if they're used to performing already, it's funny you mentioned dance. I love dancers. I love dance. I love watching it. I don't dance, but this gentleman right here in my background is that's Baryshnikov. And
oh yeah.
if I lean over, that's a massive book about dance that
Oh
on my bookshelf. If people are only listening, I'm pointing at things on
yeah.
my bookshelf
So
behind me.
you got interested in that art form at an early age, even though you didn't partake
Yeah,
yourself.
I just have always loved watching professional dancers dance.
Yeah.
I took 1 year of modern jazz because like you grow up as a girl, it's kind of what you do. You're gonna take a dance class
Yeah.
of some sort. And I never like it. I didn't really take to it personally. To me, myself trying to dance doesn't feel the same way as myself watching people dancing really well. But I love watching people dance.
Oh, that's
Um,
so interesting. It's very
my
voyeuristic.
Yeah, I mean, from a seat that I
And
paid
not through
for,
your living room
like
window.
not through like windows. Um, my friend has that joke that I'm always either at the ballet or at the therapist's, which is true, actually.
It's a kind of therapy.
Yes.
So you, and now when you say you grew up doing it, you grew up mostly in Paris, is that correct?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Paris.
Okay.
So from the age of 0 to 7, I was in one suburb. And then when I was 7, we moved to a different suburb that was closer to Paris. And I
Okay.
was there until I started college. I spent a couple of years in Paris itself, my first 2 years of college. And then I lived in London for a year. And then I came back to Paris and its suburbs. And then I moved to New York in July of 2014. And I've lived in the US ever since.
Okay. So growing up in Paris, clearly you had some kind of interest in the arts,
Yeah.
watching dance at least, but were you, what kind of kid were you? Were you a creative kid? Were you a studious kid? Did you know what you wanted to do with your life?
I was a really good kid. I did not start
You strike me
misbehaving.
as somebody who would have been a good kid.
I was such a good kid. I didn't start misbehaving until I turned 27.
Hmm.
Uh,
And by
you
that
know,
time, no one cares.
yeah, by which time I was the one in charge.
Right.
Okay. Um, but when you don't go through that stuff when you're a teenager, you just
Yeah.
go through it when you're an adult. I was a really good kid. And I think because I grew up in a household that I think I would describe as kind of strict,
Hmm.
I was bored a lot. And so I discovered pretty early on that a boring situation that you don't want to be in, can be made a lot more fun if you start telling yourself a story in your head.
Hmm.
And none of the like it wasn't necessarily like a sad situation or a bad one,
Right.
but I was a kid, I was raised in a way like you were expected to go along with things, even if it wasn't fun for kids.
Yeah.
So like long dinners or long walks. And what kid likes to walk for a
Were
long
you an
time?
only child?
No, I have an older sister
Okay.
who, yeah, she's 3 years older. But so I just escaped in my own thoughts a lot,
Yeah.
and I think in the end it served me well. And I was also a kid who read a lot. And I think I did mention I was a good kid. My biggest rebellion actually was just sticking to my guns and wanting to be a writer and wanting to be creative.
Huh.
Yeah, I wanted to be a journalist, and my parents were like, it's really hard and it's a tough industry. You should probably do something else. And I wanted to be a novelist as well, and same
Right.
deal,
Don't even mention that if they said that about journalism.
yeah. and and when it mattered, it was like the one thing where I was like, I need to do this, even if people disagree. And of course, now that it's somewhat worked out, everyone's thrilled,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. And I think though that hallmarks of intelligence and high creativity do correlate with, easily bored. I see that evidence with a lot of writers that I talk to. It's just like it's almost like a dopamine hit that you need to have some kind of entertainment. And I think now that entertainment is easily solved, unfortunately, through phones or whatever, where we can get that. We can distract ourselves, but there's something to be said about wallowing in that boredom to the point that it forces your creativity to come out and you build on that. And it makes me wonder if there's a generation being lost
Right.
because there you can turn your attention somewhere else.
Yeah, I've noticed that in myself too. I've
Yeah.
actually been in the past 12 months or so, I've become really conscious of needing my mind to be idle sometimes, which
Yeah.
is a thing that you have to sort of like proactively cultivate nowadays.
Yeah.
And I've really detached from my phone in the past year or so because I think I'm a better writer when I just let my mind do its own thing and when I allow myself to just be bored. You
Yeah.
know, mind
Yeah.
can't wander if it's always stimulated.
I think
Um,
I think that's totally true. I mean, I think for me, for those of us who don't outline and you're sitting down for the day and you're not really sure what to do, even those 5 minutes before you start typing is great because it's almost a frustration that turns towards ideas. But you need that kind of almost that meditative silence to get there.
Oh yeah. Actually, it's interesting that you bring this up because yesterday was a national holiday. We're recording this on January 20th, and yesterday was MLK Day, and so I was away from my desk for 3 days. My husband and I went to ski in Vermont, and I was a little nervous about taking like 3 days off, and I actually found that being away from the computer, being away from my manuscript, because I'm working on my next novel right now, being away from it really helped me.
Yeah.
It because it gave me time to just be with the story and my thoughts about the story, and it gave me some distance. And I was like, I need to add this and this and this, and I need to fill in those details, and this is lacking, and this is missing, and I need to put it this and this and that. Sometimes when you're in it day in and day out, it becomes hard to see it, to get a feel for it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you live with something for so long, you don't see it. And Yeah, there's a lot of different schools of thought on this. I remember Stephen King always writing like, yeah, you write a book and you put it in the drawer for 6 months. I'm like, well, most of us don't have the luxury to just put it in the drawer for 6 months. It's due, or we're trying to query it or whatever, or we got to get on to the next one. But I find for me, writing only an hour a day or less, but 7 days a week, but so I'm never away from it, but I'm never taking an idea too long. And that gives me time to kind of like measure things out because I don't think about my book a whole lot outside of that hour. But once in a while, you'll be driving, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like, oh, he's got to have a scene of mental breakdown. Why did I not see that? Because, and you're cultivating that in your subconscious, I think.
A
Um,
100%.
you know,
100%. Actually, at the literary festival where we met at Hampton's Whodunit, I was in my panel and I wasn't trying to think about my book, right? I was trying to be in my panel and say things that were intelligent enough for the crowd. And suddenly my mind went, I need to kill off this character.
yeah,
Like it was just like lightning bolt out of nowhere. Like this needs to happen. And
right.
I like went back to my hotel room at the end of the day and I wrote it down and stuff and it worked. Like it was actually what the book needed. And I do think it's the subconscious that just like works at the back of your mind, which to me, going back to being a good kid, I was like always doing homework and stuff. Sometimes it feels almost too good to be true. Like I look like I'm watching TV, but my subconscious is working.
But
But
I think I
it's
think that
true.
I think that is true, and I don't think people give enough credit for it because my nights are spent watching TV, and there will be that moment where you lean in and like, why am I so interested in this person? Why does this character, let me mentally deconstruct what they're saying and why that resonates. And you start to realize like, oh, because X, Y, and Z, and that affects your storytelling as well. This same thing like this podcast, just the mere act of talking to other writers gets the juices flowing a little bit. I start, a lot of times I finish the podcast and it makes me think about my own work because I'm excited by what this person kind of revealed to me that maybe pointed to some insights about myself.
100%. Do
Yeah.
you find that when you're watching TV or a movie or reading a book, do you like hyperfixate sometimes on some characters or one aspect of things? And if so, do you have any examples?
I think my biggest problem, and my partner will be the first to tell you this, is that I find myself very easy to criticize, which is a super annoying factor to have in somebody you're watching TV with. Because I feel like I can recognize. So I'll give you a good example. So we're watching season 2 of Landman now. Season 1 was great, had its flaws, but season 2, it's just immediately the characters have become totally one dimensional.
Mm.
Um, and I will just point out the littlest things that just take me out of it. Small example. This is so stupid, but this family living in Texas decides to throw um, a seafood night. That's the theme for dinner, seafood. So they're like,
Mm.
oh, it's going to be pirates. And the next scene where they show it, it's like they've got their whole house tricked out like it's Pirates of the Caribbean. And I'm like, all right, they've had 3 hours. Where did they get all this stuff? They had outfits, full blown outfits. Like, I'm like, this makes zero sense. With a great show, you can almost kind of get away with that. But if there's other flaws, you're immediately like, I'm fixating on these gaps of logic because you haven't pulled me in through character. And it tends to just be lazy writing or writing room writing where you could tell it's 8 people writing this. Um, on the other hand, sometimes I'll be like, watch how he says this line. Watch like and listen to what he doesn't say. And that's he's not pandering to the audience. Like I love stuff like that. Succession is a great show, like where they'll just say a lot at once that you can't even understand most of it. And that's because they're not talking to you. They're talking
Yeah.
to each other. And I have so much respect for that.
Yeah, that's very well put. That's very true. It is a show where you feel like the characters are having a conversation and you're just eavesdropping,
It's
and
totally. And I just rewatched Succession very few shows I'll watch a second time. I rewatch it and
Oh, really?
I kept the subtitles on the whole time because I wanted, and oh my God, the writing is so elevated when you do that. I'm glad I didn't do it the first time, but the small things that you wouldn't hear are brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I kept the subtitles on for it too because
Yeah,
I found that I was just missing out on too many little lines, you
right.
know. There's
Yeah,
only so much my poor brain can process.
exactly.
We're
Well,
tired.
and so what's in, I mean, I obviously you grew up, I'm presuming here, you grew up learning English, speaking English, because of how strong your language skills are.
Thank you.
Um, but and you were at first, you went to, didn't you go to graduate school here in the States?
Yes, I went to
Yeah,
grad school, yeah, here in New
yeah,
York.
yeah. Jump right here, journalism at Columbia. So obviously, you captured the language well, and your life was words.
Yes.
And so, and I always, I've talked to a lot of writers who have started the journalism path, which always strikes me as a very good training ground, especially for thriller and suspense writers, particularly, depending on what you're writing. But I think my guess is it really trains you how to get to the point in kind of an emotional way and you're like, you have this much space. How am I
Mhm.
going to capture that person? And I think that's what a thriller is. It's like there's zero patience for paragraph long descriptions of shrubbery.
Have I ever described shrubbery? I've probably described some shrubbery in my day. Now I'm gonna make it an Easter egg. I'm gonna
Yes,
add
you
some
should.
shrubbery
You should.
details. um, no, but you're very right, right? Like journalism teaches you, I think simply journalism teaches you to write for the reader, right?
Yeah.
When I'm writing an article for a newspaper or a magazine, first of all, I'm not even writing entirely in my own name, right? I have a byline, but I'm writing for a publication.
Yeah.
And so I'm learned like there's an act of you're very aware that you are writing something that is meant to be read, which sounds elementary, but is actually something I have to remember whenever I'm writing, right? Like this is going to be read by somebody. You have to grab their attention, you have to keep it, you have to surprise them, but you also shouldn't confuse them.
Right.
In thrillers, sometimes I know sometimes I try to go a little too fast. And my editor will tell me things like, I know this is in your head, but you need to put it on the page.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I do think journalism teaches you how to write with someone in mind. It teaches you how to omit needless words, as they say in like the Strunk and White style book, which
Right.
I think we all have. I have it somewhere on
And
my
that
shelf.
becomes a muscle over time where you start identifying,
Yeah.
like, a clumsy example would be somebody say, needless to say,
Yeah.
whatever. I dialogue when someone's telling somebody else, needless to say, and it's like, well, clearly you're just telling that, so you're telling the reader, and it's painfully obvious. Get rid
Yeah.
of those three words.
Get rid of me. Yeah. Another thing I find myself doing, because again, in journalism, just the incredible luck, like I've been edited just hundreds, possibly thousands of times, right? Like
Right.
just it pays attention to every word. You learn how to write and how to speak pretty specifically and precisely in journalism, right? Like, not every robbery is a burglary.
Right.
Not every car accident is a car crash. Not every car crash is a car accident. That kind of
Right.
stuff. And also, it's because an article is usually much shorter than a book. You also get to sort of train yourself on little things on smaller bits of writing. So, for example, varying sentence length or the sentence type.
Right.
Whenever I find myself starting a sentence with I wondered where blah 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 blah. What a missed opportunity to phrase this as a question so that
Right.
you can pick up
Where?
your cadence a little bit. Where was she? Not I
Right.
wondered where she was,
Right. Right.
little things like that. And I know that came from just writing a bunch of articles for like 10 years.
Right. And for those of us without journalism training, that becomes something you learn over time. And what
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to do and it's exhausting to do. But if you just open your manuscript and take a sentence and say, how can I make this shorter? That doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you can't, and maybe you shouldn't, but
Maybe
you
you
will
shouldn't.
find all of a sudden you will find ways to do it that you're like, that sounds better. And if you do that enough, you start writing like that and the pacing just takes off. Even if you're not writing like a suspenseful scene, if you're writing kind of a tone, mood, emotion scene, it just flies by and people are absorbing it. And I think people tend to think, okay, well, isn't that dumbing it down? It's not at all. It's being pithy.
No.
It's
Yeah.
it's like in cooking where you're reducing something to its essence by
Mhm.
boiling off the excess. And what you're left with is much more flavorful.
Yeah, no, it's you're left with the important stuff and the beautiful stuff. Like usually I have to write three sentences to write one good sentence. So then I
Right.
cut out the other two.
Right.
My writing is very iterative. Like I'll do like a lot of like I'll say the same thing in three different ways, but we don't need the three different ways in the final product. We need one.
Or
We
you're
need
not
the
even
best.
aware that you're being redundant until you go back and read it. It's like, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm finding that a lot with some of the students that I'm coaching is is not giving the readers credit, right, for understanding.
Mm,
Like one sentence about somebody, an internal thought about how this character thinks about herself, and it might be a self-loathing kind of a comment. You're like, oh, we get it. She's got issues around herself. You repeat that two or three more times, all of a sudden you're like, I don't even like this character because there's bitching about themselves. And but you don't,
yeah.
and the author thinks like, oh, they don't understand. I got to make sure I really reinforce this, and then it just it's too much. But you learn that from getting edited.
You learn that from getting edited. I don't know if you find this, but especially I find in the realm of suspense, it's really hard for me to understand whether I've told the reader enough, too much, not
Right,
enough. Sometimes I feel like a red herring is really obvious because I know,
right,
but usually it's actually at the right level. If I feel like I've disclosed too much, usually it means I've disclosed enough. Like you just kind of like get to know yourself and know how you're tuned as a
right,
writer, you
right.
know? Um,
Yeah, you're totally right because I think the actual bigger problem with aspiring writers is they tend to say too much
mhm.
and exposition, backstory, where it's just like we don't need all of this. But yeah, the other end of that spectrum is like how much is like to your example earlier, how much is still sitting in the author's mind. But I think that's an easier problem to deal with, but you still need it pointed out. You know, you can write dozens of books and you'll still need somebody to say, I don't understand what the issue was here. You need to explain it a little bit more
Yeah.
thoroughly. And again, that might just be one extra paragraph. It might not be
Oh
much.
yeah. It doesn't usually the fixes are not like massive, you know. Something I know for myself, I always a lot of what I do in the revision stage is just filling in the details. I tend to not describe my characters physically until I'm like multiple drafts in
Yeah. Yeah.
because I don't know what they look like
Right.
until I'm multiple drafts
I
in and then
almost
I
never
find
describe them
them.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a favorite phase of the writing process and a least favorite one of everything it takes to go from like nothing to a book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So as a non-outliner, I'll usually start with just a very broad idea. And so those first few chapters are exciting because I'm like, I don't know where this is going, but look at this person. What are they doing? I don't understand any of this. And that's kind of fun because it's a puzzle for me. And that excitement lasts about 100 pages. And then you're like, how do I even this doesn't even make sense. It's fun, but now I got to figure out how this all works. So probably that like I think around 30,000 words is when I really get freaked out on my first draft because from 30 to 50, it's just no man's land for me. And it's got to be the heart of the story. And then 50 to 90, you kind of see it all starting to shape up a little bit. And then I love writing the ending because it's always this, it feels like closure, it feels emotional, it feels good. But I usually don't know what that ending is until right before it happens. What about you?
I I tend to suffer through most of the first draft. I
Yeah.
don't outline like you.
Yeah.
I really worry about the first drafts. I don't think I would write if writing was only the first draft.
Right.
If there weren't second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth drafts after. I do a lot of work in revision. The first draft worries me, generally speaking, although usually once I'm over 20,000 words, I know I'm going to finish. Like that's
Yeah.
when I know it's going to be a book,
Yeah.
20,000. I love writing endings, and I
Yeah.
allow myself to be very sentimental when I'm writing my endings, at least at first.
Yeah.
And I always like feel it. I'm highly emotional around the
Yeah.
time that I'm writing an ending. I mean, I do think, finishing a book, it's something you're only going to do a finite number of times in your life. And
Right.
if you're Stephen King, maybe you'll do it like 200 times.
Right.
Uh, but for like you can still count that. Like it's still a finite number. It's a little bit like running marathons. You have to get to the 70,000 words in order to reach 95,000, and so it just feels like so much has to add up to get to that stage. But my favorite bit is revisions.
Yeah.
Just like when I have something and I get to make it better, and I know my characters a little bit, and I get to know them again, and I can hang out with them already knowing who they are. That's my favorite stage. So I usually spend months in revision, more time than I do in the first draft.
This is revision. This is self-induced revision before you get to your editorial notes.
Um, no, it's mainly with my
Got
editor
it.
and my agent. Although the project I'm working on now, I did give myself a couple of months to revise on my own.
Yeah.
So some of it happens on my own, and then some of it happens after I've had notes.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. So for example, what I'm writing now is due August 1st, and I'm
Mhm.
at like 55,000 words right now. And I
Mhm.
know this is going to land around 85 or so with the first draft. So I'm making good progress and I'm going to finish that draft relatively soon. But then it's like 2 to 3, like two, probably, at least a month and a half of self revision, and then I give it to my agent, who's an editorial agent. So she gives me like great feedback before we give it to our editor. Um, but that's the whole thing too, is like you have to give yourself the time, and you can't, I think, and maybe this is journalism probably has really helped you with this. You can't half-ass it, right? It's so
No.
easy. And I always say this, like with a 9 to 5 corporate job, like, you have responsibilities and you do it and you've done it good enough, right? And that
Mhm.
doesn't work with writing. With writing novels, it's like, yeah, reads okay, but and that's the lazy way out.
Mhm.
You have to challenge, like, well, yeah, but maybe I should kill this guy, and that would mean a
Yeah.
massive rewrite, but it does feel more interesting. Um, and we're never done, right? When I finish, I never type the end because I know
Me neither.
my agent's going to get it. I know my edit. I'm like, I can't wait for the next phase where they help me make it even better for the stuff that I can't see.
You're the first writer I've ever met who doesn't write the end, and I don't write the end.
I've
I
never in
never
my
write
life
the end
written that.
because
So,
I never feel like it's the end. It's almost like a
right,
superstition. I don't write the end because it's not the end. Like
right.
usually when I have the complete manuscript, then the work can begin.
I mean, yeah, it is a superstition. There's something about the practice of it that to me feels a little bit precious. Like the end, kind of like people think you finish the book and that's the book, and that's just not the case at all.
Yeah.
There are so many iterations going through, and writing the end to me feels like, oh, it's perfect. Here's the end. This is, I don't know. That's just a weird idiosyncrasy with me,
No,
but
I understand. I don't do it either. I totally understand writing the like I understand the satisfaction from it. Like
totally.
because it is the crossing of a finish line. You have finished a new project. I completely understand because it is the only time you get to do it. But I've never done it. And as a result, sometimes I have wondered when I send the new manuscript to my agent or my editor, have they ever done a double take? Like, wait, was that the last line? Like, I always hope it's obvious enough, but I
Right.
don't really know.
Right. Yeah.
Was that
It's
the end?
there is something about it. I don't know what it is, but the funny thing is like I don't even feel, so you're writing that first draft and you finish that scene, and that last scene should, to me, you should tear up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's just almost an adrenaline release. But I don't have this sense of like, oh my God, look what I just did. Because the next day I'm editing. Next day I go back to page one and I'm excited because I'm now I get to make it better. But I never have that sense of completion, probably not until, you know, until the editor has accepted the editorial notes and now you're just to like copy edits and stuff like that. That's when you're like, all right, my major responsibility with this book in terms of the writing is over.
Yeah, I feel like there is a sense you get, it's quite intuitive, right? Like when you've gotten it to the place where it needs to be, and you start to be able to think about turning your mind to the next thing.
Right.
Um, do you ever miss characters after a project is done?
It's funny, like maybe not in a conventional sense, but I will say with my last book, Tell Me What You Did, I brought back a character because I only write standalones, but I brought
Mhm,
back a character from 5 books before
mhm,
because I always liked this character. She was like the first character who I wrote totally first person present tense, only from her point of view. And I brought her back and I started writing her again, and it was like wearing an old jacket. And I'm like, oh, I missed you. And it was such a weird because then I fell into her voice, even though I wasn't writing from her perspective, I fell into her voice pretty quickly. And that surprised me, I guess. And I'm like, I want to do this more.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I've never reprised a character. I don't think, no, I've never, but I don't have as many books. So I haven't
Yeah.
had a chance to do it yet, but that is interesting. I do get that feeling. I have it right now. The novel I'm working on right now is my bread and butter. I've been thinking about it for a year, and I've been in it for months, and I'm having this feeling, which I do love, of I don't know what I'm going to do with myself when I can't hang out with these characters every day because I really love them. And now I know them. And I don't want to transition to a new cast of characters. I don't know. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they want.
Right.
You know,
Well,
that
it's
feeling.
right. It's a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And but the funny thing is, like, I feel like before I'm finished with a book, typically something happens where I have an idea.
Yeah.
And it's not fully formed, and I never, ever, ever write it down. And I tell myself, if I'm still thinking about this, and it might just be a character who I don't know. I had this experience once where this woman just appeared to me, and I'm like, who are you? What's your deal? And I just kept, and I knew she was a savant, and I knew she was 20 years old, and that's all I knew. And I just kept thinking about her, and I didn't ever write it. And I'm like, if I'm still thinking about you a year from now, I'm going to write your story. So I'm almost distracted by the next idea as I'm finishing the first idea. I never
Yeah, I
have that
get
in
that.
between time where like, what am I going to write about?
What am I gonna do? The same as you. I never write down ideas for novels because if they're good enough, I'll remember them. Right? Like the ones you're meant to write are the ones that won't leave you alone. If you
Yeah.
can forget it, then you're not meant to write it.
Yeah. And what's scary to me is when you have a great idea, like a great high concept, and and then you start writing and you start to think, do I have, is there enough here? Is there
Mm-hmm.
enough? The book that's coming out in November was like that, and it turned out to work out great. But I knew immediately, I'm like, this book is going to be told over 5 hours. That's it.
Mm.
And I'm 100 pages in at that scary part, and I'm like, can I tell this story in 5 hours? Can enough happen mentally and physically to keep this story going? And it was scary for a little while, but then I
Yeah.
realized like, oh, we need to explore what happened to them 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And even if I don't show that much, just that idea of like what their past lives, how it was informing what's happening in this moment helped fill that out a little bit.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So you, so your first book was crazy successful, which annoys a lot of people. Um, uh,
Especially.
book two has come out. Book three will be coming out. But I don't know, from an outsider's perspective looking in, and I'm not suggesting you didn't struggle, but to have that level, was that the first book that you wrote, The Quiet Tenant?
No.
Good.
Um No, it was not. First, I actually have a French novel that was
Uh-huh.
not a thriller that came out in September of 2020. So I wrote a novel in French, and it came out with an independent feminist press based out of Paris
Okay.
in September of 2020. Heck of a time to release a book.
Yep.
And it was a literary novel about a female bodybuilder
Hmm.
who is forced to spend a few weeks managing her sister's bakery, and it ruins her entire life. And I had a lot of fun writing it, and it was very different. And like the publication was very different. I think more people read The Quiet Tenant before it came out than people have read my French novel to this day.
Yeah.
So I had that experience. And then, like most everybody, I have a novel that is in a drawer and
Yeah.
will stay in the drawer forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I mean, by the time The Quiet Tenant happened, I had been trying to make something happen for years, for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
And as in, like, I remember around 2016, 2017, I went through a period of time that was quite painful for me personally because I was not where I wanted to be in my work life. And I don't know, I wasn't that I was 26, but I always say I didn't feel young at 26.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's because I emigrated to the US, and you like lose a couple of years when you emigrate because you kind of like have to figure out your life from scratch over again.
Yeah.
But I felt like I woke up and I was 26, and the last age I remembered being was 22. And I didn't understand. I didn't understand where those 4 years had gone by, and I felt like I hadn't spent them working on what I should be working on. And I remember hunkering down around that time. It's funny, I actually very rarely talk about this period of time, but
Mm.
I started taking creative writing classes, like one
Yeah.
on one at an organization called the Gotham Writers Workshop in New York
Okay.
City. And I read craft books, and I tried and I tried and I tried to understand what it meant to write a novel and to construct a story. And it was the hardest thing I've
It
ever
is.
had to
Yeah.
do. And it was maddening because I was going nowhere fast. And it just took years of going nowhere fast to get to The Quiet Tenant, which I signed the contract for it in 2021, and then it didn't come out until 2023. By the
Yeah.
time it came out, I was like 7 years into this journey personally. So
Yeah.
it was not overnight for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great reminder. It's funny. I was talking to a student literally earlier today who was kind of complaining about, you know, Pitch Fest, for example, at Thriller Fest, where you're pitching to
Mm-hmm,
agents, and
mm-hmm,
it's like, well, everyone asks for manuscripts, and then you follow up and you email them, and not only do you not get a rejection, you don't hear back at all.
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's horrible, and it's super frustrating. You should at least be getting some kind of response. But the lesson is, it's like, yeah, so what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Do you love it enough that you can handle that kind of frustration
Yeah.
for potentially years? I mean, my first three
Mm-hmm,
books didn't sell, it was years before my first one. And, even when in my case, my first one was tiny. It was like a nothing
mm-hmm,
little book, I'm proud of it, but, and it's just a slow build,
mm-hmm.
and you don't do it unless you have that weird passion plus tenacity plus stubbornness to keep saying, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work, even though most of it's not even in your control.
Yeah. I figured out at some point along the way that I was happier trying and failing than I was not trying at all.
Oh,
Like,
I love that. Yeah.
as painful as it is to get rejected and to try to understand something and to not manage to do it, or to try to write and to know that it's not good yet, you're not
Right.
there yet. That sucks. But it's the happiest I can be.
Right. But
I'm
knowing,
miserable.
recognizing you're not good enough at least is like, but
Yeah.
that means at some point I'll be better.
Yeah, exactly. But when I'm miserable is when I'm not trying.
Yeah.
I'm not writing.
Yeah.
I'm not failing at something, basically.
I
Um,
totally agree. That's such a good way of putting it. I love that because honestly, I think it's okay to give up on things. Like not everything
yeah,
is for everybody. I took guitar lessons because I wanted to play the guitar, and then after a while, I'm like, okay, I did this, that was fine, but it's not my passion.
Yeah.
So to recognize what is your passion, to recognize, yeah, I might not ever have anything published, but maybe when I'm 80 will be my breakout novel. I love the best thing about writing is the best can always be yet to come,
Yeah.
which I love. It's funny for you because your first book was so successful, which is amazing. That creates this kind of outward and internal pressure on you
Oh, yeah.
of like, okay, if the next one doesn't do as well, how will my publisher feel about that? But more importantly, how will I feel about that? Because that's usually the case, by the way.
Yeah, it was I put a ton of pressure on myself. I put a ton of pressure on myself when I do anything, you know? When I go to the coffee shop, I rehearse my order in my head before I say it out loud, right? Like,
I
it's
love it.
just how
I
I
love it.
exist. We're like, we're striving for excellence. Um, and I find it maddening when I just have to like struggle my way through something. That was the case when I had to learn how to drive. I learned how to drive really late. I was 30 and
Yeah.
I sucked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
bad.
It's
And
hard.
it's dangerous to be bad at
It's
driving.
hard and
You know,
dangerous
like it's
to you and
really
everyone
hard.
around you.
And I was so self-conscious, which made me a worse driver. It was horrible. No, I put a lot of pressure on myself after the Quiet Tenant came out, and but I also had this thought that I think following up a novel is just always going to be a bit of a mind mind. Are we allowed to swear on this
Whatever you
podcast?
want to say.
A bit of a mind fuck.
Yeah, totally.
um, because you know, I think if your book breaks out, then you have the pressure of are your readers going to follow you into something new? Are you going to be writing at a level that you find satisfying? But also, I feel like if a book doesn't find its readers, then and you have like a two-book deal, for example, then I think you would feel like it's your last chance to find your audience, to find your readers, and to connect with them. So I accepted that just this uncertainty and this pressure and this insecurity is always going to be there. And I
Yeah.
think that the antidote really is in your relationship to the writing itself.
Hmm.
I find that my insecurities vis-a-vis sales or commercial performance or whatever, or reviews, are my anxieties are much more in check when I am personally satisfied with the work. When
Yeah.
I know that it is what I wanted it to be, it's
Right.
just becomes easier for me to let go. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. But your those fears are well founded in the sense that, yes, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we can learn to let go and we can learn to accept, which I'm a huge proponent of. But the hard, cold reality of publishing is that many publishers will drop you if you don't have sustained success to the level that they're looking for. I mean, I'm talking out of my ass here, but I would say Poison Pen Press, my publisher, Source Books, with me, they've taken the long-term view and they've nurtured me. I mean, I'm writing right now what will be my eighth book for them. And they're my third publisher, where, they could have dropped me earlier for like decent sales, but not blockbuster sales. But some publishers will. That pressure's real.
It's a real kind of pressure. And I've been lucky. I've worked with very supportive people. I have felt very, very supported and by my publisher, Knopf in the US, and everyone has been great. It's just like even for me internally, that pressure is here. Like I
Yeah,
said, I rehearse my coffee order before I say it out loud.
that's
So
a you
I,
problem.
that's a total me problem.
That's awesome.
Um, but yeah, it's here, and you can use to channel it. But I also think everyone feels that way. That's another thing I try to remember. I think Baryshnikov, we were talking about him earlier, once said, I believe, unless that quote, but I think he said, no one looks into the mirror and sees an icon looking back. And
No, if
and
you
I
even
love,
bother to look in the mirror at all,
yes, yes.
I
But
avoid the mirror.
I love that quote because he's the definition of an icon,
Right.
you know. But and I think even Stephen King wakes up and feels like some guy. And
Right.
I don't think any writer ever feels confident or comfortable that the future is going to be okay.
No, I think that's what keeps the
You know,
writing sharp though, too.
yeah, exactly, exactly. How have you coped with that pressure when it has, reared its head?
So I finished a draft and I edited it. And my attitude towards it is I have done the best that I can do so far.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking for help. And that's when the editors and the agents come in. They don't write it for you, obviously, but they give you great notes. And then, man, once it's done, I am very able to like just let it go. I will say with the success of Tell Me What You Did. So Tell Me What You Did is my most successful novel to date, and that came 10 books in, right? So it's kind of new to me. Like I've got a new book coming out in November. I don't know. So what I can control is my presence, my ability to communicate, my ability to show up in person and online and to be a good good literary citizen. But whether the book takes off or not, there's only so much I can do about that. So, once you get into your mid 50s, you kind of start just stop giving a shit about like worrying. Like it's just, because like I think your point is well taken. I'm happy with it. My
Yeah.
editor's happy with it. I've gotten good feedback. If it fails, it fails. If it takes off, it takes off. So,
And in a way, also, you can define failure in many different
oh,
ways. I think
100%.
writing something that you're happy with is the achievement in itself, you know?
Right. Totally. Like with my first book, were that book to even sell 10,000 copies, which I'm sure it didn't. I don't even know at this point. That to me would have been like, oh my God, I'm a huge success.
Yeah.
And now a lot of people would say like, that's the bare minimum you have to sell. Or, so the goalposts are always moving. And I try to kind of keep that in perspective of like, man, even just to have one book published, that was my goal in life. Like once I started writing, I'm
Yes.
like, just to be able to show my kids I wrote this. And then it's good to keep having goals, but to have gratitude about what has happened, I think you have to always earmark some time for that.
That's something I always try to go back to because it's like you said, right? The goalpost keeps moving. You've achieved something, so you have to do it again and you have to do it better, or like this other thing needs to happen or whatever. And then once in a while, I have a moment where I'm like, I didn't speak English significantly for the first 10 years of my life, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't know how to count to 10 in English for the first years of my
Yeah.
life. I started learning English when I was 9 or 10 in primary school. The notion that I would write a novel in English, publish a novel in English, like in itself, that is a miracle for me, you
Right.
know? And so I try sometimes to remember that, like just the goal was to do this, and then everything else is gravy, but just
Yeah.
like having done it in itself is crazy. And I think it's important to remember that. I was listening to an interview by this singer called Damiano David, and he's Italian from Rome, and he's the lead singer of a band called Maneskin, which maybe people will know about. But he's Italian, and he grew up in Rome. And then the band won Eurovision, but they became like world famous, and they had this worldwide success. And now he's having this solo career, and he has talked about this, like they were nominated for a Grammy, and they didn't get the Grammy. And like, are you going to be sad about that, or are you going to remember that you were the only Italian band to get nominated for a Grammy
It's
in like
amazing.
however many years,
Yeah.
So perspective sometimes can be very helpful.
And at the end of the day, I know that I'm making a living by writing stories that just I make up that is exercising my brain and is fun and I'm reporting to myself. And the
Yeah.
satisfaction that comes from that, having worked in the corporate world for decades, is amazing. Like it's just that
Yeah.
alone is like, even if I'm making less money, I'm happy because, I'm living a creative life and that is very fulfilling to me.
That's the reward. That's another thing I remember. Like even people like writers who have like immense commercial success, right? Like even Stephen King, for example, his life isn't that different, from like I it's not my impression that he like,
No, my
flies
impression
private
that
jet
he
or
lives a very
whatever.
humble life.
Right. Like he gets up and my impression is he gets up and he like has a coffee and he writes and he takes walks in the woods and he likes his dog. And I do all these
Right.
things every day.
Right.
Right. Like that's my impression based on his memoir. But I mean, his memoir of the craft on writing and also his tweets.
Yeah.
And
Right.
he likes his family and his pets and his books and he likes to read and write and to go to baseball games. And like I also love all those things and I get to do them. So
Yeah.
I feel like and so that's the life that people want,
Totally.
and I think it's important to appreciate it.
I agree. Well, Clemence, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to
Yes,
go into our storytelling.
let's
Um, th-
improv.
this is the making it up portion of the show. So I have three books here that I picked at random. You're going to choose a book. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page, make up a short story. So I'll read that sentence and then you give me the next one or two sentences that just pops into your head. I'll do a couple sentences. And then after a couple minutes, I'll call it a day. So I have David Bell's The Finalists,
Okay.
Lars Kepler's The Mirror Man, and Tana French's The Searcher. So choose one of those.
Let's do the searcher.
Okay,
I'm
so
a French.
give me a page number between 1 and 450.
73.
Okay.
1973 was a good year for rock and roll, I believe.
Oh, look at you. All right, I'm going to quickly scan page 73, see if I can find a good sentence that works. All right. There's a lot of dialogue here. Okay, you do whatever you want with this. This is just a piece of dialogue. There's no names. So, what do you want to do with him?
Play Dungeons and Dragons.
I looked down at the kid who looked back at me, smiling awkwardly, gave me a little nod, indicating he wanted to play. But I knew that's not what Terrence really wanted to do. I knew what he had in mind was far darker.
We'll play later, I said, knowing I was making a promise I could not keep. For now, come over here. I slid the knife behind the toaster, hoping the kid hadn't managed to catch a glimpse.
I knew nothing about this kid other than the fact that he didn't deserve what Terrence wanted to do to him. Because Terrence liked control to such an extent, it usually came at another person's complete lack of control. If things go wrong in 15 minutes, there's going to be a real problem in this kitchen.
All right, think. The thing with Terrence is he can't resist a chance to show off. So I said, "Hey, Terrence, you know that lock on the door that leads to the attic?" Terrence nods. "Could you pick that for us?" Again, Terrence nodded. He could never resist a chance to show off.
He said, "Follow me." And inward, I felt the satisfaction of having done at least one good thing in my life. And as Terrence left the room and went upstairs, I turned to tell the kid to take off. But as I moved my head, I saw the little boy now holding that knife with a look on his face that surprised me. We can call it there. Why
I
don't we
love
call it
that.
there before we get into like child homicide in a graphic
I
description?
was like, he's gonna go for Terrence. I
That
do
was fun.
so that was you introduced a ticking clock, and I thought that was really smart. In 15 minutes, something bad, like that
Mm.
was a good reflex. Good job.
Oh, I didn't realize I did that.
I said, oh my God, we only have 15 minutes to get out of here.
Well, what a pleasure to spend. Yeah, I've gotten to know you a little bit better. Obviously, we're hoping to work on some stuff with the writing retreat, but what a great chance to sit down and kind of pick each other's brains a little bit more. So now I feel like we're that much closer.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun. And
It-
you're such a great presence in the writing world. Like you said, a great literary citizen. So this was a treat. This was lovely.
oh, thank you. And I'll see you when? I'll see you at Thriller Fest, I'm sure.
Yeah, you will
Uh,
see me there.
that will probably be the first time. So awesome.
Yeah, I'm going back to Hamptons this year because last year my team and I won trivia and our prize was tickets. So
That's great. And you're relatively close, so that makes a lot of sense.
yes. And this time I'm bringing my car because Hamptons without a car was a little tricky.
It was a
So
little quiet. Yeah. All right, Clemence, we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
thanks again,
All
Carter.
right. Bye.
Bye bye.
All right, friends, that is it. That is my conversation with Clémence Michallon. Um, yeah, it was kind of a fucked up storytelling. It was going quickly to child homicide. Um, I think maybe I started that. I don't know. I think she's the one who came up with the knife. But we stopped it at the appropriate time. So I'm glad for that. Her last book is Our Last Resort. It is out now. You can check it out. And The Quiet Tenant, her first book. And you can read everything you want about her at her website, which is just clemencemichallon.com. If you don't know how to spell that, look it up in the show notes. And if you're interested in my books, my newsletter, more episodes of Making It Up, you can just go to carterwilson.com. And if you're interested in any kind of coaching or writing retreats, you can check out my company at unboundwriter.com. All right, that is it. That is it for me today. That is it for the episode this week. Another episode, of course, out next week. Thanks, friends. I really appreciate you either listening to this as a podcast or watching it on YouTube or on my website. It means a lot to me after 5 years of doing this. All right, see you soon. Take care.